everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to talk about my most anticipated releases for summer of 2022, specifically for July through September of this year. I do videos like this every 3 months where I talk about my most anticipated book releases for the next season, basically. So I did a video back in January where I talked about my most anticipated releases for like January through March, and then I also did a video for April through June. So yeah, today we are here to talk about July through September. These are going to be mostly romance books, mostly traditionally published books, because with indie published books, usually those authors don't give a lot of advance notice before publishing their books, but I do have a few indie books on this list. First up, we have a release on July 5th. This is For You and No One Else by Ronnie Lauren. This is book 3 in their Say Everything series. And every time I talk about these books, this series, I always feel the need to point out that I feel like these are very weird covers, and I personally don't think they're the most accurate representation of the stories inside, but I would still highly recommend that you give these books a chance. I gave books 1 and 2, I can't remember the titles, but I gave both of those books 5 stars, so I am really looking forward to this one. This one centers around Eliza. She is a therapist, but it sounds like she's also an online influencer. But basically she ends up as a viral worst date ever meme. And so everything in her Instagram filtered world begins to crumble. And so I think she comes up with a plan to just give up social media for 6 months. And so our hero Beck teaches her the wonders of surviving the real world. The next book we have is Anastasia by Sophie Lark. This is set to come out July 17th. I don't even think a cover has been released yet. As far as I know, if a cover has, I'll put it over here. And I don't think Sophie Lark has said much about what this book is, except that it is, I believe, a fantasy romance retelling of Anastasia. And I think it's also going to be inspired by the Anastasia animated film, in that her love interest is going to be Dimitri. I think that was his name from the movie and the stage musical. But yeah, other than that, we don't know anything, which is crazy because this book is set to come out in just a couple of weeks. But the next release I have to talk about is The Bodyguard by Catherine Center. I just skimmed this synopsis and I am like 10 million times more excited now. Catherine Center writes women's fiction. I have really enjoyed a couple of her books. Things You Save in a Fire was really great, and What You Wish For was also a really great read. But this one says, Hannah Brooks looks more like a kindergarten teacher than somebody who could kill you with a wine bottle opener or a ballpoint pen. But the truth is, she's an executive protection agent, aka bodyguard, and she just got hired to protect superstar actor Jack Stapleton from his middle-aged corgi breeding stalker. That sounds so good. I have to say, I just immediately assumed based on this cover that the hero was going to be the bodyguard. So I'm a million times more excited now that I know that the heroine is the bodyguard. Next up, we have another July 19th release. This is Heat Wave by TJ Klune. This is the 3rd and final book in his The Extraordinary series, which is just a spectacular YA gay superhero series. Seriously, books 1 and 2 of this trilogy are some of my favorite books of all time. So to say that I'm excited for this 3rd and final book is putting it very, very lightly. I definitely intend on rereading books 1 and 2 before jumping into this, because I've definitely forgotten some plot points. And plus, I just adore TJ Klune's writing style, and I still feel like this series is underrated. So if the premise I gave to you entices you at all, also, I want to point out that Nick, our main character, has ADHD, and he loves writing fan fiction about the superheroes in his world. Yeah, if that doesn't entice you to pick up this series, I don't know what will. Next up, we have Master of Iron by Trisha Levenseller. This is coming out July 26th. This is going to be the 2nd and final book in a YA fantasy duology. So I have been holding off on reading book 1, and I can't remember the title, but I've been holding off on reading that book because I just wanted to be able to binge the duology as a whole. And from what I can remember of the premise is that we have our main character who's a blacksmith, and I think she accidentally imbues a sword with like crazy magical properties, and so I think people are after her and the sword now. And I've really enjoyed Trisha Levenseller's works, especially The Shadows Between Us is a fantastic YA dark kind of fantasy romance. It was so good, so I'm really excited to check out this duology. Next up, we have 3 historical romances all coming out on July 26th. So the first one I want to bring up is A Duchess by Midnight by Charis Michaels. This is book 3 in her Awakened by a Kiss series, and what's so fun about this historical romance series is that it's basically fairy tale retellings, and her inspiration was that she wanted to give like forgotten characters from fairy tales and Disney movies their own happily ever afters. So this one specifically is centering around Drusmina, aka Drew, who is inspired by Drusilla from the Cinderella movie. And as you can tell by the cover, she's got like flaming red hair and she's wearing a pink dress, just like the character in the movie. Actually, what this is making me think of is Cinderella 2. Did you guys ever watch that movie? You can go watch it on Disney Plus if you haven't. But Drew gets her own romance with this sweetest guy who's like the town baker. So anyways, that's what that's what this is reminding me of. But this involves Drew and how she wants to launch a school, and there is a reclusive duke who is going to be the hero of the story. So that sounds really intriguing. I have liked this series. I really enjoyed book 1. Book 2 was disappointing because as much as I loved the characters, like that one centered around a Tinkerbell-like character getting her own HEA, and it took place primarily in Iceland, which I thought was really freaking cool. But the pacing of that one was really slow, so I ended up giving that one 3 stars. But I am hoping that I will enjoy this installment much more. So the next book we have is The Return of the Duke, also July 26th. This is by Lorraine Heath. This is book 3 in her, I think it's the Once Upon a Dukedom series. I know nothing about this book because I've yet to read books 1 and 2 of this series, and I don't want to spoil anything having to do with this series really, but I do have this one pre-ordered, and this cover is absolutely stunning. I am so happy to see that Lorraine Heath is still getting these beautiful clinch covers, because I have not been happy with some of the recent cover reveals that I have been seeing from Avon, and that's all I'm gonna say about that. And then the last historical romance coming out on July 26th is Nobody's Princess by Erica Ridley. This is book 3 in her Wild Winchester series. This is going to be Graham's story. If you know nothing about this series, this is essentially a found family series, which like found families are like my favorite trope ever at this point. I love them so much. And book 2, which is The Perks of Loving a Wallflower, is still one of my favorite historical romances that I've read this year. That was a sapphic romance. But this one is going to be about Graham. And what's really cool about this family is that it centered around these 6 siblings. They were all adopted by this baron who has now passed away. And so they all have like these really interesting skills and talents. And so Graham is a straight up acrobat. He is so freaking talented. I feel like he has other skills too that were featured in The Perks of Loving a Wallflower. So I am just so pumped for his story. This cover is stunning. Yes, give me this vibe. I am obsessed. All right, so next up we have a few releases that are coming out August 23rd that I am so pumped about. The first one is Ruby Fever by Ilona Andrews. This is book 6 in their Hidden Legacy series, which is an urban fantasy series. You could also think of this as book 3 in the second trilogy in the series, because the first trilogy centered around Nevada and Connor, and then this second trilogy centers around Catalina and Alessandro. And oh man, this is such a cool world. I'm obsessed with Ilona Andrews. They are a husband and wife writing duo, and I read the whole first trilogy last year, absolutely loved it, and have been holding out on starting the second trilogy because I wanted to wait for this book to come out so I could just binge all 3 of them. And I am so pumped to finally read this trilogy. I'm probably going to end up rereading the first 3 books before jumping into this part of the series, because this is a pretty complex world and magic system. It kind of takes place in what feels like kind of a post-apocalyptic Houston, Texas. I mean, it's not really like the apocalypse has happened, but it definitely gives that vibe, especially the way that Houston itself is described. This cover is gorgeous. I'm obsessed with the red. I just love the vibe of the covers for this part of the series. The covers for the first 3 books suck, but the covers for these last 3 books are absolutely amazing. Next up, we have Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. This is going to be her follow-up from The Love Hypothesis. I don't know if this is going to be a companion novella, and that we're going to be following maybe friends of the main characters from The Love Hypothesis. I'm assuming so. This cover is absolutely adorable. I love this art style. I've also been reading her STEMinist novellas, which have been really fun. I'm sure this is going to be a really good time, just like The Love Hypothesis was. I know nothing about the plot, obviously. I know nothing about the characters or anything, but I'm definitely excited for this one nonetheless. So then last but not least, on August 23rd, we have Much Ado About Dukes by Eva Devon. This is book 2 in her Never a Wallflower series. Book 1 was The Spinster and the Rake. I really enjoyed that book. I gave it 4.5 stars, and I don't know much about the plot for this one. It looks like it's about William Easton, who's a duke, of course, and then we have Beatrice, who is a lady of nobility. It sounds like this is gonna kind of be like a rivals, enemies to lovers kind of situation, because it mentions that they have a lot of heated arguments, but they also can't help the chemistry between the two of them. And I'm just excited because I've read 2 books by Eva Devon at this point, and I've really enjoyed both of them. Her writing style is just so addictive to me. Next up, on August 25th, we have Darn It All by Evie Mitchell. So this is book 3 of her All Access series, and I very recently read Not My Type, which is book 1, and I loved that book so much. Oh my god, it was so good. And that book was about Jay and Frankie. What's really cool about this series is that it centers around this friend group, and there's a lot of really great disability representation. So Frankie in book 1, she is a wheelchair user, and she also has a podcast all about accessibility in general, but it seems like a lot of her episodes center around sex and making sex more accessible for people with disabilities. And so she meets Jay, the hero in that book, because he is kind of a specialist expert in shibari, which is the art of rope tying in BDSM. And so they meet and sparks fly, and that was just a fantastic book. So book 2 is already out, which is called Love Flushed, which I believe the character, one of the main characters in that book, has Crohn's disease. And then, like I said, there is no synopsis out yet for this book, so I don't know who the main characters are going to be, but I love these covers, so I'm just excited. So we actually only have a few books left. We have one more book for August. That is Carrie Soto Is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know nothing about this book now that I'm thinking about it. I'm pretty sure though the main character, Carrie Soto, is a tennis player. Yes, I really like the vibe of this cover as well. The gold is giving me everything. But it's Taylor Jenkins Reid. Do I need to know anything going in? No, absolutely not. I've given every book that I've read by her at least 4 or 4.5 stars. The majority of the books that I've read by her I've given 5 stars, especially her more recent releases like Daisy Jones and Evelyn Hugo. So I'm super pumped for this. I'm always going to be excited for a new release by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Next book though that I have is The Weight of Blood by Tiffany D. Jackson. Tiffany D. Jackson is the queen of YA thrillers. I will say that with my whole chest. This one is interesting. I think this one is also sort of a horror novel, just like White Smoke, her most recent release, was. That was definitely more horror than thriller. But this one says it follows a biracial teenager as her Georgia high school hosts its first integrated prom. When Springfield residents, at least the ones still alive, are questioned about what happened on prom night, they all have the same explanation. Maddie did it. It sounds like it's a surprise to her community that she's biracial. She's been passing as white. And so that sounds like this leads to her high school having its first integrated prom. I really don't need to know anything when it comes to Tiffany D. Jackson's books because I know I'm gonna love it. I don't think I think White Smoke is the only book I've read by her that I've given less than 5 stars. So I'm still really excited about this because I have a feeling that she is really going to be stepping up her game in terms of writing horror, because as far as I can tell, White Smoke was kind of her first foray into true horror. She usually writes thrillers. So for September 27th, we have How the Wallflower Was Won by Eva Lee. This is book 2 in her Last Chance Scoundrels series. So I read book 1, which is The Good Girl's Guide to Rakes, earlier this year. Yes, I gave it 5 stars. I really loved it. I feel like Eva Lee is really coming into her writing prime at the moment. And so this one is going to be Finn's story. Finn was the best friend of the hero from book 1. Super excited for this. We have our heroine, Tabitha. They go into a marriage of convenience. Of course, they don't think that it's a love match, but of course it's going to become a love match. And yeah, I'm just really excited. Eva Lee writes some hot historical romances. Last but certainly not least, we have a release on September 30th. This is Losers by Harley LaRue. I saw this last night and I internally screamed when I saw this cover reveal and the blurb reveal and everything. So this is the full novel follow-up to The Dare, which is a novella by Harley LaRue. And I read that, I think in October of last year, absolutely devoured it. I did not expect to love that novella as much as I did. Basically, that's a really dark and twisted erotic novella, and it involves the heroine she was like the mean girl in high school, and the hero, I can't remember names of course, she used to bully the hero, and so now it's a few years later, they're maybe in college or out of college at this point. They're at this house party with everybody that they went to high school with, and so the hero and heroine end up playing this game of beer pong. She loses, and so she basically has to be his slave for the rest of the night. There is also a scene that involves, I believe, 3 of his best friends, which are also guys that she bullied in high school. And so the plot of this one is that it's gonna be a reverse harem with all 4 of those guys. And I am so freaking excited. Oh my God. Harley LaRue, like I said, she writes some dark and twisted shit, and I'm here for it. I saw somebody post on Goodreads. They said, this will be my Joker. And honestly, I feel the exact same way. All right, guys, that's going to be it for my most anticipated book releases for July through September. Definitely leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of these books, or if you have any books that you are really excited for their releases that I may have forgotten to talk about. I am not perfect. I'm sure that I have forgotten some books. Thank you so much for watching. I would love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!